There's a finger bone in a museum in Leipzig. Just one bone. A pinky finger from a child, found in a cave in Siberia in 2008. Scientists tested the DNA, and that's when everything changed. The bone didn't belong to a modern human. It didn't belong to a Neanderthal either. It belonged to something else. Someone else. A completely unknown type of human that nobody knew existed. They called them Denisovans, named after the cave where that single finger was found. Here's what makes this absolutely wild. That one bone rewrote human history. Because when scientists started looking closer at modern human DNA, they found something shocking. Denisovan genes. Inside us. Right now. Millions of people carry Denisovan DNA, mostly in Asia and the Pacific. Some populations have up to 5% Denisovan genes in their genome. We're part Denisovan. We just didn't know they existed until 2008. Think about that for a second. An entire species of human, living alongside us, breeding with us, passing down their genes. And we had no idea. We found their DNA inside us before we found their bones in the ground. It's like discovering you have a cousin you never knew about. Except the cousin has been dead for 50,000 years, and you only found out because their genetic signature is literally written into your cells. This is the Denisovan mystery, and it gets stranger the deeper you look. Because here's the thing, we found almost nothing. A finger bone, a few teeth, part of a jawbone discovered in 2019. That's it. That's the entire physical evidence for an entire species of human. No complete skeleton, no skull, no artifacts we can definitely say are theirs, just fragments, and DNA. But that DNA tells an incredible story. A story about humans we never knew existed. About interbreeding we didn't know happened. About genes that helped modern humans survive in extreme environments. Genes we still carry today. The Denisovans were real. They were widespread, they were successful. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years across Asia. And we barely have enough bones to fill a small box, so who were they? Where did they live? What did they look like? How did they think? What happened to them? And here's the biggest question, the one that keeps scientists up at night. If we found their DNA before we found their bones, what else is hidden in our genome? What other unknown humans are we carrying inside us? The story of the Denisovans is the story of ghosts, human ghosts, written in genetic code, invisible until we learned how to read it, and once you start reading you can't stop. Because every answer raises 10 new questions. This is that story. Scientists had a finger bone, a few teeth, part of a jawbone. That was it. That was everything physical they had from the Denisovans, but they had something else, something much more powerful, DNA. And not just DNA from those bones, DNA from living people, millions of living people carrying Denisovan genes right now. The DNA told a story the bones couldn't, a story about where Denisovans lived, who they bred with, how they survived, what they gave us. Here's what the genetic evidence revealed. Denisovans weren't just in Siberia, they were all over Asia, from the frozen north to the tropical south, from the mountains of Tibet to the islands of Southeast Asia. We know this because different populations carry different Denisovan genes, and those genes tell us where encounters happened. People in Papua New Guinea carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. Australian Aboriginals have it too. So do people in the Philippines, in Indonesia, in parts of China. Each population has slightly different Denisovan sequences, which means there wasn't just one interbreeding event. There were multiple encounters, different Denisovan groups breeding with different human populations, over thousands of years, across thousands of miles. The DNA reveals something else, something unexpected. There wasn't just one type of Denisovan. The genetic evidence shows at least 3 distinct Denisovan populations, maybe more, each one genetically different enough to be considered a separate group. One group lived in Siberia, That's where the finger bone came from. Another group lived farther south, probably in Southeast Asia. Their DNA shows up in people from Papua New Guinea and Australia. A third group might have lived in East Asia. The evidence is less clear. But the genetic signatures suggest it. Think about what that means. Denisovans weren't one species in one place. They were spread across half the planet, adapting to different environments, evolving into distinct populations, just like modern humans did. The Denisovans in Siberia faced brutal winters, temperatures dropping to -40, months of darkness. They survived. The Denisovans in Southeast Asia faced tropical heat, dense jungles, monsoons. They survived too. And we know they survived because they left their genes behind in us. Here's one of the most fascinating discoveries, a gene called EPAS1. It's found in Tibetan people, and it does something remarkable. It helps them survive at high altitude, where the air is thin, where oxygen is scarce. Tibetans can live and work at 15,000 feet. They don't get altitude sickness like lowlanders do. Their bodies handle low oxygen differently. Scientists studied the EPAS1 gene, traced its origin. It came from Denisovans, Denisovans living high in the mountains, adapting to thin air over hundreds of thousands of years. And when they bred with modern humans, they passed that adaptation along. That gene is still there, still working, helping people survive in Tibet today. The Denisovans have been gone for 50,000 years. But their genetic gift keeps working, generation after generation. That's not the only Denisovan gene that helped modern humans. Researchers found immune system genes, Denisovan DNA that helps fight off certain viruses, certain bacteria, diseases that were common in Asia. Modern humans moving into Asia encountered new pathogens, diseases they'd never faced before. Their immune systems weren't ready. But Denisovans had lived there for hundreds of thousands of years. Their immune systems had adapted, learned to fight those diseases. When the two groups bred, modern humans got an immune system upgrade. Instant adaptation. No waiting for evolution. It's like downloading software instead of building it from scratch. Those immune genes are still there too, still protecting people today. The DNA evidence revealed something else. Something about when these encounters happened. The interbreeding wasn't recent. It happened between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago. Maybe earlier. Modern humans were spreading out of Africa, moving through Asia, and they kept running into Denisovans. Not just once, multiple times, in multiple places. The genetic evidence suggests at least 3 separate interbreeding events. Probably more. Each time genes flowed both ways. Modern humans got Denisovan DNA. Denisovans probably got modern human DNA too. But here's the thing. We only see the Denisovan DNA that survived. The genes that helped. The ones that gave some advantage. Most of the Denisovan DNA got lost. Diluted over thousands of years. Only the useful bit stuck around. Which means the original interbreeding probably involved more DNA exchange than we see today. Much more. Scientists can calculate how much interbreeding happened. They look at the amount of Denisovan DNA in modern populations. They build models, run simulations. The numbers suggest something surprising. The interbreeding wasn't rare. It wasn't a few isolated encounters. It happened regularly, consistently, over thousands of years. Modern humans and Denisovans lived near each other. Their territories overlapped. They encountered each other often enough that genes flowed back and forth. They weren't separate species living in isolation. They were neighbours, sometimes more than neighbours. The DNA tells us something else, something about Denisovan diversity. The genetic differences between Denisovan groups were huge, much bigger than the differences between modern human populations today. The Siberian Denisovans and the Southeast Asian Denisovans were as different from each other as modern humans are from Neanderthals. Which raises a question. Should we even call them all Denisovans? Or were they different species entirely? Right now, scientists lump them together, one name for all of them, but the DNA suggests that's too simple. Maybe there were multiple species of Denisovan like humans, all living across Asia, all evolving separately. We call them Denisovans because that's where we found the first bone. But that name might be hiding incredible diversity. Here's what makes this really interesting. The DNA evidence came before the physical evidence. Scientists found Denisovan genes in living people. Then they went looking for bones, not the other way around. The genes told them where to look, what to look for, how to recognize Denisovan remains when they found them. That 2019 Jawbone from Tibet. Scientists knew to test it because the DNA had already told them Denisovans lived at high altitude. The DNA was a map, a guide to a ghost population, and that map is still being drawn. Every year, scientists find more Denisovan DNA in more populations. Each discovery adds detail, fills in gaps. They're finding Denisovan genes in unexpected places, in people who live thousands of miles from where any bones were found, which means the Denisovan range was even bigger than we thought. Their population's even more widespread. The DNA is revealing an entire hidden world, a world of human diversity we never knew existed. And here's the really wild part. We're probably not done. If Denisovans were hidden in our DNA, what else is there? What other unknown humans bred with our ancestors? Scientists are looking, searching modern genomes for genetic signatures that don't match any known human group, and they're finding hints, suggestions of something else. Ghost populations that left traces in our DNA but no bones in the ground. The Denisovan discovery opened a door. Behind that door is a much more complex human story than we ever imagined. A story written in genes, waiting to be read. The finger bone was just the beginning. If you're using this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these videos. Maybe subscribe and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always check the comments and it's fascinating. Someone in Tokyo at sunrise, someone in London at lunch, someone in California at midnight, all drifting off to the same mysteries about our shared past. The Denisovan story keeps getting bigger, because in 2019, scientists made another discovery, one that changed everything again. They found a jawbone in a cave in Tibet at 10,000 feet above sea level, and it was Denisovan. The jawbone sat in a monastery for decades, in Baishya Karst cave, high in the Tibetan plateau. Monks kept it, considered it sacred. They didn't know what it was. Just an old bone, a relic. Then, in 2019, scientists finally got to study it. They extracted proteins from the ancient enamel, ran tests, and the results came back impossible. Denisovan, at 10,000 feet above sea level, in one of the harshest environments on Earth, where the air is thin and winter kills, where modern humans struggle to survive even with technology. Denisovans lived there, thrived there, left their jawbone behind. This discovery changed everything scientists thought they knew, because it meant Denisovans weren't just cave dwellers in Siberia. They weren't just tropical islanders in Southeast Asia. They were mountain people too, high-altitude specialists, living where the oxygen is scarce and the cold is brutal. And here's what makes it even more remarkable. That jawbone is at least 160,000 years old, maybe older, which means Denisovans adapted to high-altitude living long before modern humans did. They got there first, figured it out first, survived there for thousands of years. The genetic evidence backs this up, because when scientists looked at the DNA of modern Tibetan people, they found something extraordinary, a specific gene, EPAS1. It helps the body use oxygen more efficiently at high altitude, Without it, you get altitude sickness. Your body struggles. You can't survive long term. Tibetan people have this gene. And it's not a modern human gene. It's Denisovan. Passed down through interbreeding tens of thousands of years ago. Still working today. Still helping people survive in the mountains. Think about what that means. You're a modern human living in Tibet right now. Every breath you take, every step you climb, you're using Denisovan biology, their adaptation, their evolutionary solution to a problem you inherited. You carry their survival inside your cells. This is what the DNA evidence reveals, not just where Denisovans lived, but what they gave us. Real, functional advantages, genes that still work, still matter, still make a difference in people's lives today. Scientists found another gene, WARS2, also from Denisovans, also in Tibetan populations, also helps with high-altitude survival. Two separate genetic gifts, two different solutions to the same problem, both still active, both still essential. The Denisovans didn't just pass through the mountains. They didn't just survive there temporarily. They lived there long enough to evolve specific adaptations, long enough for those adaptations to become fixed in their genome, long enough to pass them on to the humans who came after. And it's not just altitude genes. Scientists found Denisovan DNA linked to immune function, to fat metabolism, to skin pigmentation, to cold adaptation. Different populations got different gifts. People in Papua New Guinea carry Denisovan genes that affect their immune systems, help them fight tropical diseases, parasites, infections that don't exist in Siberia or Tibet. The Denisovans who lived in the tropics evolved different adaptations than the ones who lived in the mountains, and when they bred with modern humans, they passed on those specific, local adaptations. It's like they left behind a genetic toolkit, different tools for different environments, and modern humans picked up the tools they needed, kept the ones that helped, passed them on. This is what 3 finger bones and a jawbone tell us. When you combine them with DNA from living people, when you map out who has which Denisovan genes and where they live, the picture gets clearer. Denisovans were everywhere, adapting to everything, leaving their mark in our genome. But here's what haunts me about this. We can see their genetic legacy. We can measure it, map it, understand exactly which genes came from them and what those genes do. We can point to specific people and say, you have Denisovan DNA helping you breathe at altitude. But we still don't know what they looked like. We have one jawbone, thick, robust, large molars. That's it. That's all we can say about their physical appearance. We don't know if they were tall or short, dark or light, what their faces looked like, how they wore their hair, the sound of their voices, the way they moved. We know their DNA better than their bodies. We understand their genes better than their lives. It's backwards, inverted, like reading someone's medical records before you ever see their photograph. Scientists tried to work around this. They used the DNA to predict physical traits. The finger bone belonged to a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The DNA suggested she had dark skin, dark hair, brown eyes. But those are educated guesses, probabilities, not certainties. The jawbone is more concrete. Physical evidence you can measure. The jaw is massive, much larger than a modern human jaw, much thicker than a Neanderthal jaw. The molars are huge. The bone itself is dense, heavy, built to withstand tremendous force. This tells us something. Denisovans had powerful jaws, strong bite force. They could process tough food, crack bones maybe, chew through material that would break our teeth. But that's still not much. One jawbone, one finger, a handful of teeth. You can't reconstruct a whole person from that. You can't picture them in your mind. Walking, talking, living their lives. The DNA fills in some gaps. Denisovans were more closely related to Neanderthals than to modern humans. They split from Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago. Both groups descended from an earlier human species that left Africa. Genetic diversity among Denisovans was high, higher than among Neanderthals, which suggests larger populations, more geographic spread, more isolation between groups. Some Denisovan groups hadn't interbred with each other for hundreds of thousands of years, long enough to become genetically distinct, almost separate subspecies, yet they're all called Denisovans because we don't have enough evidence to name them separately. Scientists found something else in the DNA, evidence of interbreeding with another unknown human group. Not modern humans, not Neanderthals. Something else. Something we haven't found yet, maybe haven't even named. Denisovans bred with this mystery group, whoever they were, wherever they lived, and the genetic signature of that encounter is still visible in Denisovan DNA. A ghost of a ghost, an unknown human inside an already mysterious one. The human family tree keeps getting more complicated, more branches, more intersections, more groups we didn't know existed. Every new discovery reveals another layer of complexity, another population, another encounter, another mystery, and all of this from 3 finger bones and a jawbone. That's the power of DNA. That's what genetic evidence can reveal. Entire populations, migration patterns, interbreeding events, adaptations, relationships between groups separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. But it's also frustrating, because the DNA raises more questions than it answers. We know Denisovans lived in the mountains, but what did their mountain camps look like? We know they lived in the tropics, but what did they eat there? How did they hunt? What tools did they make? We know they bred with modern humans multiple times. But were these peaceful encounters, violent ones, long-term relationships or brief meetings? Did they trade, share knowledge, learn from each other? The DNA can't tell us that. The DNA shows the outcome, not the story, not the lived experience, not the human details that make history real. We're left with fragments, genetic fragments, physical fragments, trying to assemble a picture from pieces that don't quite fit together, trying to imagine a whole people from almost nothing. But those fragments tell us something profound. They tell us we're not alone in our ancestry. We're not purely one thing. We're a mixture, a combination. The result of multiple human groups meeting and merging over hundreds of thousands of years. Every person with Denisovan DNA carries that history, carries those encounters, carries the evidence of a time when multiple types of humans walked the earth together, shared the same landscapes, faced the same challenges, and sometimes chose each other. That's what the DNA evidence reveals. Not just facts, not just dates and percentages, but connection, continuity. The reality that we're all descendants of survivors, all carriers of ancient solutions to ancient problems. The Denisovans are gone, but they're not erased. They're written into us, into millions of people, into the way some bodies process oxygen, fight disease, survive cold, adapt to altitude. They're still here, still working, still helping people live, 50,000 years after the last Denisovan died. That's the real shock. Not that they existed, but that they matter, still, now, today. The altitude genes are just the beginning. When scientists mapped out all the Denisovan DNA in modern populations, they found something unexpected. The genes weren't random. They weren't scattered evenly across our genome. They clustered in specific areas, areas that control specific functions. Immune system genes, lots of them. People in Papua New Guinea carry Denisovan genes that help fight off viruses, bacteria, parasites that live in tropical environments. The genes boost immune response, make certain white blood cells more effective, help the body recognize and attack infections faster. These aren't just any immune genes, they're targeted, specific. They defend against tropical diseases that don't exist in cold climates, malaria, dengue fever, other infections that thrive in heat and humidity. The Denisovans, who lived in Southeast Asia, evolved these defenses over thousands of years. Their immune systems adapted to local threats, local parasites, local diseases, and when they bred with modern humans moving into the same regions, they passed those defenses on. It's like inheriting armor, pre-built protection against enemies you haven't met yet. The modern humans arriving in Papua New Guinea got a head start, a genetic advantage, the ability to survive in an environment that was killing newcomers. Scientists found similar patterns in other populations, different immune genes in different places, each one matched to local threats, each one originally Denisovan. In Tibet, besides the altitude genes, there are cold adaptation genes. They help the body maintain temperature, preserve heat in extreme cold, keep fingers and toes from freezing. Modern Tibetans who carry these genes have better cold tolerance than those who don't. The data is clear, measurable. You can test someone's DNA and predict how well they'll handle altitude, how well they'll fight certain infections, how well they'll tolerate cold. That's the power of these ancient genes. They still work, still provide real advantages 50,000 years later. But here's what makes this even more interesting. The genes don't just help. They change how bodies work, how they process food, how they store energy, how they respond to stress. Scientists found Denisovan genes linked to fat metabolism in populations living in cold climates. The genes affect how the body stores and burns fat. They make it easier to maintain body weight in harsh conditions, when food is scarce, when temperatures drop. This makes sense. Denisovans lived through ice ages, through periods when survival meant storing every calorie, using energy efficiently, not wasting anything. Modern populations in cold regions inherited this. Not all of them, not everyone. But enough people that the genes persist, enough that they make a difference. There are skin pigmentation genes too. Denisovan DNA affects skin color in some Asian populations, makes skin lighter or darker depending on the specific genes. This probably helped with vitamin D production, or protection from UV radiation, depending on where people lived. Every environment creates different pressures, different challenges, and the Denisovans face them all. Mountains, jungles, frozen steppes, tropical islands. Each environment shaped them differently, created different adaptations, and modern humans picked up those adaptations when they needed them. When they moved into Denisovan territory, when they encountered these other humans who'd already figured out how to survive there. It's the most successful technology transfer in human history. Not tools, not fire, not language, genes, actual biological solutions, downloaded directly into our genome through interbreeding. Think about what had to happen for this to work. A modern human and a Denisovan had to meet, had to choose each other, had to have children together. Those children had to survive, had to reproduce, had to pass the genes on. This happened multiple times, in multiple places, with multiple Denisovan groups. Each encounter left a genetic mark, each mixing event transferred new adaptations, and the genes that helped survived. The ones that didn't help disappeared. Natural selection filtered them out over thousands of years. What remains is the useful stuff, the genes that made a real difference. Scientists can track this. They can see which Denisovan genes increased in frequency over time, which ones spread through populations, which ones got selected for. The altitude genes in Tibet increased dramatically. They went from rare to common in just a few thousand years. That's incredibly fast for evolution. It means those genes provided a huge advantage. People with the genes had more children, survived better, thrived where others struggled. Same with the immune genes in Papua New Guinea. They spread rapidly through the population, became fixed in the genome, essential for survival. This is evolution in action, captured in DNA, written in the genetic code of living people. But there's another layer to this, another gift the Denisovans left behind, and this one is harder to measure, harder to quantify, but potentially just as important. Genetic diversity. When modern humans left Africa, they went through what scientists call a population bottleneck. A small group left, maybe a few thousand people, maybe less. They carried only a fraction of the genetic diversity that existed in Africa. This made them vulnerable. Less genetic diversity means less variation. Less variation means fewer options when environments change, fewer tools in the genetic toolkit. But when modern humans bred with Denisovans, they gained new genetic variation, genes that had evolved separately for hundreds of thousands of years, different solutions to different problems, different versions of the same genes. This increased diversity made populations more resilient, more adaptable, better able to handle whatever came next. It's like adding new cards to your deck, more options, more possibilities, more ways to respond to challenges. Scientists found evidence of this in the DNA. Modern populations that carry Denisovan genes have higher genetic diversity in certain regions of the genome, more variation, more flexibility. This probably helped humans spread across the world, adapt to new environments quickly, survive in places that should have been impossible to colonize. Without Denisovan genes, would Tibetans have survived at high altitude? Maybe, eventually. But it would have taken thousands of years to evolve the right adaptations. The Denisovan genes gave them a shortcut, an immediate solution. Without Denisovan immune genes, would Papua New Guineans have survived tropical diseases? Again, maybe. But at what cost? How many generations would have died while natural selection slowly built up resistance? The Denisovan contribution wasn't just genetic, it was survival itself. The ability to move into new places and thrive immediately. Not in 1,000 years, not in 10,000 years, now. This changes how we think about human evolution. We used to think it was linear, one species replacing another. Modern humans outcompeting everyone else through superior intelligence or technology. But the DNA tells a different story. It tells a story of mixing, borrowing, taking the best from everyone we met. Modern humans didn't just replace Denisovans, they absorbed them, took their adaptations, made them our own. We're not purely one thing, we're a combination, a mixture of everyone who came before. Every encounter, every mixing event, every gene that helped. The Denisovans gave us the tools to survive in places we couldn't have lived otherwise. They gave us resistance to diseases that would have killed us. They gave us the ability to breathe thin air, to tolerate cold, to fight infections. They gave us ourselves, the version of humanity that exists today, spread across every environment, every climate, every corner of the planet, and we can measure this. We can point to specific genes, specific people, specific advantages. We can say, this came from Denisovans, this is their gift, this is what they gave us. It's written in our cells, in millions of people, still working, still helping, still making a difference. The Denisovans died out as a separate group, but they didn't disappear. They transformed, became part of us, part of our story, part of our survival. That's what the genetic evidence shows, not just that we carry Denisovan DNA, but that it matters, that it changed us, that it made us who we are. Every person with these genes carries Denisovan solutions to ancient problems, carries their resilience, their adaptations, their evolutionary wisdom. The genes are a bridge, connecting us to humans who lived and died tens of thousands of years ago. Humans we never knew existed until we found their DNA inside us. That's the real gift. Not just survival, but connection. Proof that we're all linked, all part of the same story, all descendants of everyone who came before. Beyond survival, the Denisovan genes did something else. They changed how we think, how we process information, how our brains work. Scientists found Denisovan DNA in genes that affect brain development, neuron growth, the connections between brain cells. These genes are active during childhood, when the brain is forming, when neural pathways are being built. Some people carry Denisovan versions of these genes, not everyone, but enough that scientists can study the effects. The results are subtle, not dramatic differences, but measurable changes in how certain brain regions develop, how they connect to each other, how they process information. One gene affects the hippocampus, the part of the brain that handles memory and spatial navigation. The Denisovan version changes how this region grows, how it wires itself, how it communicates with other brain areas. Another gene affects the prefrontal cortex, the planning center, the part that handles complex decisions, abstract thinking, long-term strategy. These aren't random genes, they're important ones, core functions, the kind of genes that make us human in the first place. And some of us carry Denisovan versions. What does that mean? Scientists don't fully know yet. The research is new, ongoing, but early studies show differences in cognitive styles, in how people approach problems, how they remember things, how they navigate space. People with certain Denisovan brain genes perform better on spatial tasks. They're better at mental rotation, at remembering locations, at finding their way in unfamiliar places. This makes sense. Denisovans spread across Asia, across diverse landscapes, mountains, forests, coastlines. They had to navigate complex terrain, remember landmarks, find their way, home. Their brains evolved for that, and some of us inherited those adaptations. Other Denisovan brain genes affect social cognition, how we read faces, how we interpret emotions, how we understand what others are thinking. Again, the differences are subtle, not something you'd notice in daily life, but measurable in controlled studies, real effects on real brain function. This raises fascinating questions. Did Denisovan brains work differently than ours? Did they think in different ways, process the world through different filters? We'll never know for certain. We can't scan a Denisovan brain, can't watch how they solved problems or made decisions. But the genes suggest differences, real biological variations in brain structure and function, and those variations still exist, still shape how some people think, still influence cognition in subtle ways. There's more. Denisovan genes affect the immune system in the brain, how it responds to inflammation, how it fights infections that reach the central nervous system. The brain has its own immune cells, microglia. They patrol for threats, clean up damage, fight infections that cross the blood-brain barrier. Denisovan versions of microglial genes work differently. They respond faster to some threats, slower to others. They change how the brain handles inflammation. This probably helped Denisovans survive brain infections, encephalitis, meningitis, parasites that attack the nervous system. Modern populations in tropical regions carry these genes, where brain parasites are common, where infections that reach the brain can kill. The genes still protect, still make a difference, still save lives. Scientists also found Denisovan DNA in genes that affect pain perception, how we feel pain, how we respond to injury, how our bodies signal damage. Some people with Denisovan pain genes have higher pain tolerance. They need more stimulus to feel the same level of discomfort. Their pain signals work differently. This could have been an advantage in harsh environments, when injury was common, when you had to keep moving despite damage, or it could have been neutral, just a different way of processing sensation. Neither better nor worse, just different. The point is this: Denisovan genes didn't just help us survive environments, they changed us, changed how our bodies work, how our brains function, how we experience the world. We're not just modern humans with a few helpful genes tossed in, we're hybrids, combinations, mixtures of different human lineages that evolved separately for hundreds of millennia. Each lineage developed its own solutions, its own adaptations, its own way of being human. And when we mixed, we combined those solutions, created new combinations, new possibilities. Think about a modern Tibetan person with Denisovan altitude genes. Their body handles oxygen differently than someone without those genes. Their blood works differently. Their cells function differently. Or someone in Papua New Guinea with Denisovan immune genes. Their body fights disease differently, recognizes threats differently, responds to infection differently. These aren't small changes. They're fundamental differences in biology, in how bodies operate, in what it means to be that specific person, and it all traces back to encounters tens of thousands of years ago, to humans who met, who chose each other, who had children together. Those children carried both lineages, both sets of adaptations, both ways of being human. Natural selection did the rest, over thousands of years, filtering out what didn't help, keeping what did, spreading beneficial genes through populations. The result is modern humanity. Not a single pure lineage, but a tapestry, a mixture of everyone who came before. Scientists can now map this mixture, track which genes came from where, follow their spread through populations, measure their effects. The data show something remarkable. Denisovan genes aren't evenly distributed. They cluster in specific populations, specific regions, specific functional areas, high-altitude genes in Tibet, immune genes in the tropics, cold adaptation genes in northern regions, brain genes scattered across Asia. Each population got what it needed, what helped it survive in its specific environment, what made the difference between thriving and dying out. This wasn't random. It was selection in action, evolution doing what evolution does, favouring what works, eliminating what doesn't. But here's what makes it special. The raw material came from Denisovans, from a different human lineage, from people who had already solved these problems. Modern humans didn't have to evolve from scratch, didn't have to wait thousands of generations for the right mutations to appear. They borrowed solutions, took them directly from people who'd already figured it out. Through the most efficient transfer mechanism in biology, sex, one encounter, one child, one successful lineage, and beneficial genes spread through entire populations. It's elegant, efficient, faster than waiting for new mutations, more reliable than hoping the right changes appear randomly. And it worked. Spectacularly. Modern humans spread across the world, into every environment, every climate, every possible habitat. Part of that success came from Denisovans, from their genes, from their adaptations, from their evolutionary wisdom. We carry that wisdom now, written in our cells, active in our bodies, shaping who we are. Every person with Denisovan genes is a living bridge, connecting us to humans who died out as a separate group, but who never really disappeared. They transformed, became part of us, part of our story, part of what makes us human. The genes prove it. The science confirms it. The evidence is undeniable. We're not purely modern humans. We're the descendants of everyone. Every human lineage that ever existed. Every group that survived long enough to pass genes forward. Denisovans, Neanderthals, other groups we haven't even discovered yet, all mixed together, all contributing, all part of the final result. That's what the genetic evidence reveals. Not just that mixing happened, but that it mattered, that it shaped us, that it made us who we are. The Denisovan genes in our genome aren't fossils. They're not dead remnants of extinct people. They're living, working, functional parts of our biology. They help us breathe, fight disease, think, feel, survive. They're gifts from the past, from humans we never knew, from encounters we can barely imagine. But they're real, measurable, present in millions of people right now. That's the Denisovan legacy. Not bones in museums, not artifacts in caves, but life itself, continuing, adapting, surviving, in us. So what does it actually mean to have Denisovan DNA inside you? Not just on a science level, but on a personal one. What does it say about who we are right now walking around in the modern world? It's easy to think of genes as just background noise, some code buried way down in your cells. But the truth is, every bit of your body and mind is shaped by what came before. And with Denisovan DNA, we're carrying around more than just a record of the past. We're carrying living, working pieces of another kind of human. Let's break that down a little. When you look in the mirror, you see your own face. Maybe you see your parents or your grandparents. But the story goes way back, much further than you might guess. Some of what you see, some of what you feel, is really ancient. It's not just human, it's hybrid. You're a mix, not just from your parents or your country, but from completely different humans that no longer exist. And that's not just poetry, it's literal science. Here's where it gets even stranger. People used to imagine that evolution was a straight line, like a ladder. You start with something simple, and every step is a little more modern, a little more like us, until you end up with real humans at the top. But Denisovan DNA blows up that whole idea. The true story is much messier. Think of it more like a web, or even a braid. Different groups splitting apart, coming together, sharing bits of themselves, then splitting again. So when we talk about Denisovan genes, we're really talking about a kind of memory. Not the kind you can remember on purpose, but a memory written into your blood and bones. It's a record of meetings, of shared fires, of children born to parents from different worlds. It's a memory that lives on, even when the people are gone. Let's get specific. Modern people in certain places have more Denisovan DNA than others. Some have almost none. Some have a lot, up to 1 in 20 of their genes. It's not random. It's not even. It's a pattern shaped by geography, by history, by luck, and by love. The reason for that is simple. Our ancestors didn't all meet Denisovans at the same place or time. Some met them in the mountains, some on islands, some never met them at all. So the Denisovan legacy shows up in pockets, in streaks, in surprising places. Take the people of the Philippines, especially some indigenous groups. They have more Denisovan DNA than almost anyone else on Earth. Why? Because their ancestors lived in places where Denisovans had been for a long time. When modern humans arrived, they mixed, had families. The genes stuck around. And not just the ones for survival. Sometimes random Denisovan genes got passed down for no obvious reason at all. Just chance. But what does it feel like, carrying these genes? You can't point to a part of yourself and say, that's my Denisovan side. It's not like having a birthmark, it's more subtle, a little more resistance to certain diseases, a different way of handling oxygen, maybe a tiny difference in the way you think or how you react to pain, most likely you'll never notice. But it's there, quietly shaping parts of your life. And then there's the question of identity. If you have even a tiny bit of Denisovan DNA, what does that make you? Are you still just a modern human? Or are you something new, a kind of living blend? Scientists call this admixture. But those are just words. The reality is, we're all blends. Sometimes the mix is obvious, sometimes it's hidden. But nobody is pure. Nobody has a straight, unbroken line. This isn't just about science. It's about how we see ourselves. For a long time, people tried to sort humans into neat boxes, by skin colour, by face shape, by where your ancestors lived. But the Denisovan story shows that those boxes are all made up. The truth is, humanity has always been about mixing, about sharing, about becoming something new, together. Now, let's talk about why Denisovan DNA survived in us, but most Denisovans didn't. Why did their genes last, but their people faded away? This is a big question, and there's no simple answer. Some scientists think it's just numbers. Modern humans moved in, outnumbered the Denisovans, and over time the older group was absorbed or pushed out. Others think it was disease or climate or just bad luck. But whatever the reason, the genes survived even when the people didn't. There's also something deeply human about this. We're the product of loss and survival, of blending and change, of stories that didn't end but kept going in a new form. The Denisovans' bones are almost all gone, their tools, their homes, their language, vanished. But their DNA is still here, ticking away inside millions of people. And this is where it gets really interesting. Denisovan genes aren't just a relic. They're active. They do things. They change how bodies work, even today. Every time someone in Tibet climbs a mountain without gasping for breath, that's Denisovan biology in action. Every time someone shrugs off a parasite that would make someone else sick, that's Denisovan immunity at work. Every time someone solves a problem in a slightly different way, that might be a Denisovan twist on the human mind. But as much as we know, there's even more we don't. Most Denisovan DNA is a mystery. Scientists can point to the genes, map them out, compare them to modern humans. But for many of them, nobody knows what they do. Maybe they don't do anything now. Maybe they only mattered in the places where Denisovans lived. Or maybe they're waiting for the right moment, the right challenge, to make a difference again. People sometimes ask, does carrying Denisovan DNA make me less human? The answer is simple, number. If anything, it makes you more human. Because being human has always meant mixing, adapting, surviving and changing. It's what we do best. The Denisovan genes are a reminder of that. A reminder that we're not the end of a straight line, but part of a tangled living story. Now let's zoom out for a second. Think about all the kinds of humans who ever lived. Not just Denisovans and Neanderthals, but others we barely know. Some left bones, some left tools, some left nothing but faint traces in our DNA. Every time a new gene pops up in a study, it could be a clue to a whole lost branch of our family tree. Sometimes scientists find DNA that doesn't match modern humans, Neanderthals or Denisovans. It hints at ghost lineages, people we know existed only because of the genes they left behind. The more we look, the more tangled the web becomes. So the Denisovan story isn't just about them, it's about us. It's about what it means to be human in a world where human is always changing, where the borders between groups are blurry, where survival depends on being able to learn from others, mix with others, and become something new. Here's another thing to think about. Denisovan DNA didn't always stick around. Plenty of their genes disappeared over time. Some probably didn't help us. Some might have even hurt us in the new places we moved to. Natural selection quietly filtered out what didn't work, kept what did. That's why the Denisovan genes we still have are mostly the ones that helped. The altitude genes, the immune genes, the ones that made a real difference. The rest faded out. That's evolution at work. Always tweaking, always selecting, always moving forward. But there's a twist. Some Denisovan genes are still in us, but we don't know why. Maybe they're harmless. Maybe they matter in ways we haven't figured out yet. Maybe they'll help us face future problems, new diseases, new environments, things we can't even imagine. Nature doesn't waste what might be useful someday. Let's look at another angle. Culture. We have almost no Denisovan artifacts. No art, no carvings, no clear sign of language. Just a few tools that might have been theirs, but we can't be sure. So we can't say for certain what their culture was like, what stories they told, how they saw the world. But their DNA is a kind of story. It's a message that survived, even when everything else vanished. And here's a wild idea. Maybe parts of our culture, our habits, even our ways of thinking come from those ancient meetings. When groups mix, they don't just swap DNA. They share ideas, skills, beliefs. Maybe the way we solve problems, the way we organize families, the way we handle stress. Maybe some of that comes from these lost humans too. It's hard to prove, but it's possible. Now think about identity again. What does it mean to carry the past inside you without even knowing it? Most people go through life never thinking about their ancient ancestors. But the Denisovan story is a reminder that we're all part of a big, messy experiment. We're the result of chance encounters, of old risks, of people choosing to trust someone who looked or sounded a bit different. We're proof that you don't need to be pure to survive. In fact, being mixed is the secret to our success. This shakes up old ideas about what makes us human. It's not just brains or language or tools. It's something deeper, the ability to change, to mix, to take the best from everyone and make something new. That's what the Denisovan DNA shows us, written in code that's billions of years old. Some people find all of this unsettling. It can feel strange to learn that you're not just who you thought you were, that your blood carries secrets, that your body is a map of lost worlds. But there's comfort in it too. You're never alone. You're the latest chapter in a story that goes back before memory, before history, before even language. And that story is still going. Your genes will mix with others, new combinations will appear, and humanity will keep on changing. The Denisovan DNA in you might fade out someday, or it might become the key to some new adaptation, some new survival, trick. Nobody knows. Here's something that always gets me. When you think about the Denisovans, it's easy to picture them as other, as strangers, as an extinct branch. But their DNA is inside real people right now. Kids running around in the Himalayas, elders in the islands of Southeast Asia, city dwellers in Beijing or Sydney. The Denisovan story isn't locked in the past. It's alive in the present, hidden in the ordinary lives all around us. So, next time you take a deep breath, remember, you're breathing with lungs shaped by ancient hands. When you solve a problem, or climb a hill, or shrug off a cold, you're using tools built by people you'll never meet. That's the real meaning of the Denisovan legacy. It's not about bones or museums. It's about what it means to be human, messy, mixed, imperfect, and always changing. And as science keeps moving forward, we'll learn more. New discoveries might show even deeper connections. Maybe we'll find more bones. Maybe we'll finally link a tool or a piece of art to the Denisovans for sure. Maybe we'll discover even more hidden branches in our family tree. Every answer raises new questions, and that's what makes it exciting. So, the next time someone talks about pure humans or about clear lines between people, remember the Denisovans. Remember that your body tells a different story, one of mixing, sharing, changing, and surviving. one where every person is part of something bigger, something older, something still unfolding. That's what it means to carry Denisovan DNA. It means you're part of a story that never really ends, a story that's still being written, right now, inside you. Let's slow down and really look at what we know, and what we don't, about the Denisovans as a species. Not just the DNA inside living people, but the actual humans themselves. The ones who walked, talked, made fires, and looked up at the stars in their own way. The truth is, Denisovans are almost invisible. They're a ghost species. We know they were here, but we barely know how they lived, what they believed, or even what they looked like. Most of what we have is a puzzle with more missing pieces than found ones. Think about this. We have more confirmed moon rocks than we have confirmed Denisovan bones. That's not a joke. There's the famous pinky finger, some teeth, and a chunk of jaw. No complete skull, no full skeleton, not even a single bone that tells us for sure what their faces looked like. Every artist's drawing of a Denisovan is a guess, based on DNA and a few clues from the jawbone. You could walk past a Denisovan on the street and, honestly, you might not notice. Or maybe you would. Maybe their faces were just a little different, wider or with a stronger jaw. But nobody knows for sure. This is strange when you think about how many Neanderthal bones we've found. Dozens of skeletons, hundreds of teeth and skulls. We know what Neanderthals looked like, how they buried their dead, even some of the tools they made. But the Denisovans, it's like they stepped out of the shadows for a moment, left a few traces, and vanished again. So how do we even know they existed at all? The answer is DNA. But the question everyone asks is, why haven't we found more bones? Why do they seem to disappear just as quickly as they appear? Some scientists think it's about where they lived. The regions Denisovans called home, high mountains, deep forests and humid caves, aren't great for keeping bones safe. In places like Siberia or the Tibetan plateau, the soil eats up remains. Rain, melting snow and plant roots break down bones over time. The caves might have been the only reason anything survived at all. Denisova Cave protected that finger bone for tens of thousands of years. The Baishia Cave in Tibet saved the jawbone. Without those caves, maybe we wouldn't even know Denisovans ever existed. But even with the bones we do have, the story stays blurry. The teeth are huge, bigger than any modern humans. The jaw is thick and strong. That hints at a tough life. Maybe they chewed hard roots or ate a lot of meat. Maybe their world forced them to use their jaws more than we do. But those are just guesses. Nobody's found the tools or weapons for sure, or a Denisovan campfire, or anything that says this was definitely made by a Denisovan hand. Scientists have searched caves all over Asia. They dig through the dirt, sift through layers, looking for a sign. Sometimes they find tools, simple flakes, stone blades, and even some jewellery. But it's hard to match these to Denisovans. Other humans lived in Asia too. Modern humans, Neanderthals, maybe even other unknown groups. The layers get mixed up. Bones and tools get moved by animals or water. You find a tool, but whose was it? Without DNA on the tool or in a bone nearby, you can't be sure. That's part of what makes the Denisovan story so weird. It's like reading a book with half the pages torn out. You get flashes of a story. Someone was here, someone left a mark, someone mixed with our ancestors, but the details are lost. Whole chapters missing. You're left with questions. Let's talk about what we've actually found, piece by piece, and what we can learn from each one. Start with the pinky finger. It belonged to a young girl, maybe around 13 years old, who lived in Siberia over 50,000 years ago. They nicknamed her ex-woman. Her bone is tiny, but the DNA inside it was enough to change everything we thought we knew about human history. When scientists sequenced her DNA, They realised she wasn't Neanderthal or modern human. She was something else. That one finger told us there was a lost branch of the human family tree. The teeth found in Denisova cave are massive. If you set them next to a modern human tooth, the difference jumps out. They look more like something from a gorilla, but the DNA says human. Nobody knows exactly why Denisovan teeth were so big. Some think it was their diet. Maybe they ate tougher food, or their jaws grew bigger as an adaptation to their harsh environment. But without more bones, it's hard to know if all Denisovans had huge teeth, or if the ones we found were just outliers. The jawbone from Tibet is a treasure. It's the oldest high-altitude human fossil ever found, over 160,000 years old. The jaw's thick, the molars are large, and the shape is different from both Neanderthals and modern humans. The protein in the teeth matched the Denisovan DNA. It's like a message sent from the past. We were here, living in the cold and thin air, long before anyone else. But again, the jaw alone can't tell us everything. We don't know what the rest of the body looked like. Were they tall, short, broad, slim? The jaw suggests a powerful bite, but that's all. Beyond these, there's almost nothing. A few bone fragments too small to study. No skull, no rib bones, no hands or feet. There's not even enough to say if Denisovans looked more like Neanderthals, more like us, or like something else entirely. Even their skin colour, hair type and eye colour are mysteries. The DNA has some hints, but it's not clear. Some studies suggest they might have had dark skin, dark hair and dark eyes. Others leave the question open. The only thing everyone agrees on: Denisovans were definitely not just another kind of Neanderthal. They were their own thing. Now let's talk about what's missing. This is almost as important as what we have. No Denisovan art has ever been found. No cave paintings, no carved figures, no beads or jewellery we can link to them for sure. There are some simple pendants and tools in Denisova cave, but they could belong to modern humans or Neanderthals who also lived there. The cave was busy, overlapping groups moving in and out. Without DNA, you can't assign an artifact to a specific group. Some scientists think Denisovans might have had art, music or rituals, but we just haven't found it yet. Others think maybe they didn't. Maybe they lived more simply, or maybe their art was made from wood, leather, or bone, materials that rot away and leave no trace. Or maybe their creative side showed up in ways we can't recognise. Sometimes the absence of evidence feels like a clue itself. Maybe Denisovan culture was different from ours in ways we can't even imagine. But here's where things get even more mysterious. The Denisovans left almost no direct evidence of their homes, their tools, or their daily life. Archaeologists have looked for fire pits, stone circles, or bone piles. They found some hints, but nothing that screams Denisovan. The cave layers are mixed up, churned by animals and floods. Sometimes the only way to sort it all out is by finding DNA in the dirt, not in bones. That's right. Scientists can now test cave dirt for ancient DNA. They've found Denisovan DNA in the soil of Denisova cave, even in layers with no bones. It's like a fingerprint left behind by someone who walked through, sat down, or bled a little. But it's still just a whisper. It doesn't tell us what they did, what they wore, or what they believed. Let's zoom out for a moment. Why is the Denisovan trail so faint compared to other ancient humans? Part of it is geography. They lived in places that are hard to search. Remote mountains, deep forests, caves now buried or flooded. Part of it is luck. Maybe we just haven't looked in the right spots yet. Or maybe there were never that many Denisovans to begin with, so there's less to find. Some scientists think Denisovans were always rare. Maybe they lived in small scattered groups, never building big settlements or leaving lots of trash behind. If you only have a few hundred people spread over a huge area, there won't be many bones left for archaeologists to find. Another clue comes from the DNA itself. The Denisovan genome is weirdly different, even between the few individuals we've sampled. The girl from Siberia and the jaw from Tibet are separated by more than 100,000 years and thousands of miles, yet they're related. That suggests Denisovans spread out over an enormous area, maybe farther than any other ancient human group except us. Some scientists think there could have been several different Denisovan populations, each with their own look and way of life. But because we only have a handful of remains, it's impossible to say for sure. Here's something to think about. Denisovans might have lived alongside modern humans and Neanderthals for tens of thousands of years, sometimes in the same cave at the same time, sometimes separated by just a few miles. They probably met, traded, maybe fought, maybe shared food and stories. But the only evidence we have for these meetings is in our DNA. The bones are silent. It's not just bones and tools we're missing. We have no idea what language they spoke. Did they have words for stars, for rivers, for family and love? Did they sing? Did they bury their dead, or leave them out for the animals? Did they believe in anything after death? With Neanderthals we have some clues. Burials, maybe a necklace or a flute. With Denisovans we have nothing but questions. But even with all these gaps, the Denisovan story isn't empty. The little we do know is powerful. For example, scientists have used new technology to find traces of Denisovan DNA in the bones of hybrid children. In Denisova Cave, they found a bone fragment from a girl whose mother was Neanderthal and father was Denisovan. That's mind-blowing. It means these groups didn't just meet, they started families together. Their children were real people, living in the same world, sharing food, learning from both sides. DNA has also revealed something else. Denisovans may have mixed with other groups we don't even have names for. When scientists look at Denisovan genomes, they find signs of even older ancestry, traces from humans who split off before Neanderthals and Denisovans ever existed. It's like a shadow inside a shadow. Some call these super-archaic humans. Nobody knows what they looked like, or where they lived. But their genes are there, hiding inside the Denisovan DNA, which is now hiding inside us. It's a chain of ghosts, each one fading into the next. One reason this is so fascinating is because it shows just how messy human evolution really was. There was never a clear line, never a clean break. People mixed, drifted apart, met again. The Denisovans were part of that. They weren't outsiders, they were family. Sometimes that family was close, sometimes distant, but always connected. If you're wondering why we haven't found a Denisovan skull, you're not alone. Scientists talk about it all the time. The first person to find a real Denisovan face will become famous overnight. Until then, all we have are guesses and models. Some reconstructions use Neanderthal skulls as a base and add features from the jaw and teeth. But it's just a guess. The truth might surprise everyone. Maybe they had big noses to warm cold air, maybe wide faces to handle high altitudes, maybe something totally unexpected. Here's another puzzle. Why did Denisovans disappear? Their DNA survived, but their bodies did not. Did modern humans push them out? Did changing climate make survival impossible? Did new diseases wipe them out? Or did they simply blend in so much that the group faded away? There are no clear answers. Every possibility is still on the table. Some scientists think Denisovans might have survived longer than we realize, maybe even into the last 20,000 years. If they lived in remote mountains, it's possible small groups held on, unseen, until very recently. Some local legends in Asia and the Pacific talk about wild people or mountain spirits who lived apart from everyone else. It's tempting to wonder if these stories are memories of Denisovans. There's no proof, but it's a fun idea. The lack of Denisovan tools and art could also be a hint about how they lived. Maybe they used simple tools, or made things from wood and plant fibres that didn't last. Or maybe they lived in ways that left little trace, moving often, hunting, gathering, never settling down for long. If you don't build big shelters, if you don't bury your dead, if you don't make stone carvings, the world forgets you quickly. But even with all these blanks in the story, the Denisovan legacy is still alive. Their genes are proof. Every person with Denisovan DNA carries a bit of their story, even if the details are lost. The fact that we're still finding new Denisovan genes in people today means the story isn't over. Every new discovery, every tiny bone, every fragment of DNA adds another piece to the puzzle. It's possible that somewhere in a cave nobody's searched yet, there's a Denisovan skull waiting to be found. Maybe even a whole skeleton buried by a landslide or hidden in a corner. When that day comes, we'll learn more about their faces, their bodies, maybe even their lives. Until then, we have to be patient. Science moves slowly. The Earth keeps its secrets well. Think about how strange this is. We live in the most connected time in history. We can talk to people on the other side of the world in seconds. We can send robots to Mars, but we still don't know what one of our closest relatives looked like. That's humbling. It reminds us that the past is bigger than we are, that there are stories under our feet waiting to be told. So, when you hear about Denisovans, remember, they're not just a name in a book, they're a mystery we're still solving. A ghost species hiding in the shadows of our DNA, waiting for the day when someone finds the next clue. Maybe it'll be a tooth, a bone, a scrap of cave, painting, or just a line of code in a computer. Each new piece will bring them closer to us. And this is where it gets really interesting. The less we know, the more we wonder. The mystery itself is part of what makes Denisovans so fascinating. Every blank space in their story is an invitation to look, to dig, to imagine. Maybe that's what being human is all about. Not just knowing, but searching. Not just finding answers, but asking better questions. From here, the real question isn't just who the Denisovans were, but why they vanished. Why did their world end while ours continued? What happened in those lost mountains, in those silent forests, all those years ago? That's the next mystery, and it's one we're still trying to solve. So, let's get into the theories. Why did the Denisovans disappear? Why is their story so faded, with hardly any bones or art to show for it? Scientists have spent years trying to crack this mystery. There's no single answer, but there are a handful of ideas that keep coming up. Some sound simple, others are wild. All of them give us something to think about. Let's start with the most basic idea. Maybe Denisovans just got outnumbered. Picture this. You've got small groups of Denisovans living in scattered places. The world is changing around them. Climate shifts. Animals move. New humans, like us, show up with new tools and ways of living. If the Denisovans never formed big groups, they might have been easy to push aside. They could have faded out family by family without a big fight or a single disaster. Sometimes, it's not a war or a disease that wipes out a group. Sometimes it's just slow drift. Fewer babies born, more dangers, less food. Over time, a people can vanish almost without anyone noticing. But there's more to the story. The timing matters. Denisovans survived for a long time. They handled cold, heat, high mountains, deep forests. They met Neanderthals, modern humans, and maybe other groups. Too, they even had children with them. If they were so good at surviving, why did they fade away when they did? One theory is about competition. When modern humans spread into Asia, they brought new technology. Better stone blades, needles for stitching warm clothes, maybe even better ways to share food and stories. If Denisovans ran into these newcomers, they might have lost the race, not because they were weaker, but because they didn't change as fast. It's like two teams in a game, but one team gets better equipment. Over time, that gap matters, but it's not just about tools. Modern humans travelled in bigger groups. They made alliances, traded with neighbours, built networks. Denisovans might have stayed in smaller bands, more cut off from each other. That makes a group vulnerable. If one family has a tough winter, there's nobody nearby to help. If a disease comes through, there's less backup. This idea is called the social network theory. Groups with bigger, stronger connections survive longer. Let's talk about climate too. The world Denisovans lived in kept changing. Ice ages came and went. Forests turned into grasslands, then back again. Rivers shifted. Whole herds of animals disappeared or moved to new places. Denisovans had to keep up or lose out. Some scientists think they were experts at surviving in wild places, mountains, deep woods, places where few others dared to go. That worked for a while. But when the climate shifted one more time, maybe their favourite food sources vanished for good. Maybe the animals they hunted died out or moved away. If you can't find enough to eat, it doesn't take long for a group to shrink. Disease is another possibility. When groups that have been apart for a long time meet, they sometimes swap germs. Modern humans might have brought illnesses from Africa or Europe that Denisovans had never faced before. Even a simple cold can be deadly if your body isn't ready for it. There's no way to prove this for sure because diseases don't usually leave marks on bones. But we've seen it happen in more recent history, so it's not a wild guess. Now here's an odd twist. Some people wonder if Denisovans didn't really vanish at all. Maybe they didn't die out in a dramatic way. Maybe they just blended in. The DNA shows that Denisovans and modern humans had children together. Over time, if enough mixing happened, the Denisovan group could have slowly melted into the bigger wave of humans coming through Asia. Their name disappears, but their genes live on. It's not extinction. It's absorption. You see this pattern with other ancient peoples too. Sometimes the group fades, but the bloodline keeps going. But there are even stranger ideas out there. Some scientists think Denisovans might have survived in places we haven't looked yet. Maybe in the jungles of Southeast Asia, maybe high in the Himalayas, maybe even on islands we haven't fully explored. The evidence would be hard to find, but not impossible. Every year, cavers and archaeologists find new sites, sometimes by accident. There could be Denisovan bones sitting in a cave waiting for someone to find them. If so, the story isn't over yet. There's also the idea of refugia. That's just a fancy word for safe zones. When things got tough, like when the ice ages hit, some groups might have found little pockets where life stayed good. Warm valleys, sheltered caves, places with water and food, safe from cold winds or floods. Denisovans could have survived a long time in these hidden spots. But refugees don't last forever. Sooner or later, things change, or someone else finds your hiding place. Then there's the problem of evidence itself. Maybe we haven't found more Denisovan remains because we haven't searched enough. Or maybe the clues we need have already been destroyed by time. Bones rot. Artifacts get buried deep. Floods wash away entire layers. In some places, even a few decades can erase all signs of a camp or a grave. Now imagine what tens of thousands of years can do. It's a miracle we've found anything at all. Some people have suggested an even wilder idea. What if Denisovans were always rare and their main legacy was genetic, not cultural? Maybe their way of life left few marks on the land. Maybe they moved so often, or used materials that wouldn't survive. Wood, leather, plant fibres. If you don't leave behind big piles of trash or build stone monuments, the future won't see much of you. Your story turns into a whisper, not a shout. Let's dig into the competition theory a little more. Modern humans didn't just have better tools, they may have had more flexible minds. Language, planning, and creativity all make a difference. If our ancestors could share complex ideas, how to hunt, how to make traps, how to heal wounds. That's a huge edge. Some people think modern humans might have had richer languages, or maybe more. Art, more music, more ways to keep a group together. That doesn't mean Denisovans were dumb, but even small differences can add up over time. Still, there's no proof Denisovans couldn't talk or sing or plan. We just don't have their art or their words. The bones can't tell us what stories they shared around the fire. This is one of those places where the silence in the record leaves room for all kinds of theories. Now let's look at the climate trap theory. This one says that Denisovans were so well adapted to certain places, cold mountains, deep forests, that when those places changed, they couldn't adjust fast enough. Their bodies, and maybe even their culture, were tuned to a specific world. When that world shifted, they had nowhere to go. Modern humans, on the other hand, seem to have been more generalists. They could live almost anywhere, eat almost anything, and invent new tools as needed. That flexibility may have been the key. There's also the founder effect theory, which is a bit more technical, but easy to picture. Imagine a group starts out small, maybe only a few hundred Denisovans in a huge area. If something bad happens, an illness, a long drought, a big freeze, whole families can disappear just by chance. The smaller the group, the bigger the risk. It's like playing a game with only a few pieces left on the board. One wrong move and you're out. Another angle is the genetic swamping theory. This one says that as modern humans kept moving into Denisovan areas, they had more babies than the local Denisovans. Over many generations, the Denisovan genes got mixed in, but the group itself faded away. It's not a battle, just a slow, steady blending. After a while, the original group is gone, but their genes survive in the newcomers. Some scientists look at the Denisovan DNA in living people and see something else. A record of ghost populations. That means groups who lived for a long time but left hardly any bones or artifacts. The only sign they were here is a trace in our genes. Denisovans might have been one of these ghost populations, slipping through history without leaving much behind. Let's not forget the possibility of disaster. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, sudden freezes. These things happened a lot in the ancient world. Sometimes, a single event can wipe out a whole valley or force everyone to leave. If a disaster hit a region with lots of Denisovans, it could thin their numbers fast. And if they were already living in small groups, it wouldn't take much to finish the job. Now, here's a question that comes up a lot. Did Denisovans have any allies? Or were they always alone? Some people think they may have teamed up with Neanderthals or even modern humans at times. Maybe they traded, shared food, or even joined families. If things got tough, having friends nearby could help you survive. But it could also mean losing your own group identity over time. You don't disappear in a blaze. You just become part of something new. There are stories in Asia and the Pacific about mysterious wild people in the mountains and forests. Some folks wonder if these legends are old memories of Denisovans, passed down by word of mouth. It's hard to say. Myths can last a long time, but without bones or artifacts, it's just a fun idea, not real evidence. Another theory is about innovation. Maybe Denisovans were happy with the way things were. If you've got what you need, food, shelter, family, why change? But when other humans arrived with new ideas, maybe the Denisovans didn't see a reason to copy them. That can work for a while. But if the world changes too much, not keeping up can cost you everything. Let's talk about diet for a second. The Denisovan jaw and teeth suggest they ate tough, fibrous food. Maybe lots of roots, hard seeds, or even frozen meat. If their food sources vanished, or if modern humans outcompeted them for the best hunting grounds, that could have been a big blow. Food isn't just about survival, it's about passing on your way of life. If you can't feed your children, your group can't last. Some scientists have asked if Denisovans might have been better adapted to extreme environments like high mountains than modern humans. Maybe they did fine as long as they had the cold, thin air to themselves. But once modern humans learned to survive at altitude, the competition got tougher. Genes like EPAS1, which help with oxygen use, may have given Denisovans an edge at first. But once others picked up those genes through mixing, the advantage slipped away. There's also the hidden history idea. What if Denisovans did make art, music, or even tools out of wood and plants? Those things rot away, especially in wet or warm places. Maybe we just haven't recognized their handiwork yet. Maybe we're standing on top of what remains, but it's all dust in the soil. Here's something that always gets me: the silence, the gaps in the record. You can have millions of people living their lives, laughing, loving, and learning. But if time erases their bones and their words, it's like they never existed at all, except for a few scraps of DNA. It's humbling. It reminds us how fragile memory really is. Now think about this. What if Denisovans weren't really a single group, but many? The DNA hints at several different populations, some in Siberia, some in the south, maybe even on islands or in the Himalayas. Each one might have faced their own challenges. Some could have survived longer than others. Maybe a few made it almost to the present, holding on in hidden valleys or caves. But eventually even the hardiest group will fade if the world keeps changing. Some researchers say we shouldn't think of the Denisovan story as a failure or a tragedy. Maybe it's just the way history works. Groups rise and fall, names change, genes move on. The Denisovan legacy isn't gone, it's just changed shape. It's inside living people. It's in the genes that help Tibetans breathe or islanders fight off disease. You can't see it, but it's there. The real mystery, though, is how much we still don't know. Every time scientists find a new bone, a new bit of DNA, the story shifts a little. Maybe the next discovery will show that Denisovans lasted longer than we thought. Maybe we'll find their art, their homes, or even their words, carved on a piece of bone or hidden in the dirt. Or maybe we'll never know. Some mysteries stay mysteries forever. But the search itself matters. Every dig, every test, every theory is a way of reaching back in time. It's about trying to understand not just where we come from, but what it means to be human. The fact that we care about these questions, that we wonder about people who vanished so long ago, says something about us too. So, when you hear about Denisovans, remember, they're not just a footnote. They're a whole chapter in our story, one that's mostly hidden but still there if you look close. Their end wasn't a single moment. It was a slow fading, a blending, a mystery written into the bones of the earth and the blood of the living. And this is where it gets really interesting. The more we search, the more we find hints that the world was full of different kinds of humans, all living, mixing, and sometimes disappearing. Denisovans are just one example. There may be others we haven't even dreamed of yet. The story isn't over. Each new discovery is a chance to fill in another piece of the puzzle. What happened to the Denisovans? Maybe everything. Maybe nothing simple. Maybe they're still in here in a way, in the genes that help to survive, in the mysteries that keep us searching, in the questions we ask every time we find a new bone or a new clue. And now, as we look to the future, all we can do is keep digging, keep testing, and keep wondering what's still out there, waiting to be found. The search for Denisovans is one of the strangest treasure hunts in science. For over a decade, researchers have been digging in caves, scanning museum boxes, and testing ancient dirt, all trying to chase down more pieces of the puzzle. But the evidence is slippery. Every new find changes the story in some small way. It's like you're solving a riddle, but half the clues are missing, and you're not even sure what the answer looks like. Let's start with the bones. Denisova Cave in Siberia is the main site. It's cold, dark and deep, a place you'd expect to find secrets. Inside, archaeologists sift through layers of dirt and dust, searching for anything human. Sometimes they find a tooth, a sliver of bone, or even a fragment of a tool. The cave has been used by different groups for a long time. Neanderthals lived there. So did modern humans, and tucked between those layers, Denisovan remains show up, barely enough to fill a small box. One of the first big surprises came when scientists realized the cave had been used over and over. Different humans, at different times, coming and going. They left behind bones, ash from old fires, and even bits of jewellery made from animal teeth. But figuring out which group made which object is tough. The layers are mixed. Sometimes, a Denisovan tooth is found next to a Neanderthal bone. It's like an ancient lost and found with no labels. The original Denisovan fingerbone was found in 2008. It belonged to a young girl. Her DNA told scientists she was something new, neither Neanderthal nor modern human. That bone opened the door, but it also raised more questions. Where were the rest of her people? Why are their fossils so rare? For years, teams have searched other caves in Siberia and China, hoping to find more. Sometimes there's a hit. In the Siahi cave on the Tibetan plateau, a jawbone with strong, broad teeth turned out to be Denisovan. In other places there are hints, teeth that look a bit different, or tools that don't quite match other known styles. But proof is hard to come by. It's slow going. Sometimes scientists spend months sifting through soil, only to find nothing at all. But that's not the only way to hunt for Denisovans. There's another trick, one that feels almost like magic. Scientists can test the dirt itself. Even if there are no bones, ancient DNA can soak into the soil from sweat, blood, or decaying bodies. By analysing tiny bits of DNA in cave dirt, researchers can tell who lived there, even if their bodies are long gone. In Denisova Cave, this method revealed Denisovan DNA in layers where no bones were found. It's like finding a fingerprint after the person has left the room. This dirt DNA has changed the whole game. Now, instead of needing a perfect skeleton, scientists can look for tiny traces. In some caves, they found Denisovan DNA mixed with Neanderthal and modern human traces all stacked in thin layers of soil. This suggests these groups sometimes use the same spaces, maybe even at the same time. It's not proof they met face to face, but it opens up all kinds of possibilities. The search has shifted beyond Siberia. In southern China, a few teeth and jaw bones have turned up that don't fit the known patterns of other ancient humans. Some look Denisovan, some might belong to other unknown groups, but without DNA it's hard to be sure. Teeth can look similar for different reasons. Sometimes a single groove or bump is all scientists have to go by. It's tricky. The evidence is always just out of reach. Outside of Asia, the clues get even thinner. There are a handful of fossils in Southeast Asia, on islands like Flores and Luzon, that don't match modern humans or Neanderthals. Some people wonder if these could be Denisovan, or maybe related to them. But again, the bones are fragmentary. No DNA has been recovered yet. It's another dead end. Or maybe just a waiting game. Tools are another kind of evidence, but they're even harder to pin down. The stone tools found in Denisova Cave are simple. Scrapers, points, and flakes. Nothing fancy. They look like the tools used by Neanderthals and the first modern humans. There's no clear Denisovan style. If you found them on their own, you wouldn't know who made them. This makes it tough to map where Denisovans lived, or what their culture was like. Maybe they used wood, bone, or other materials that didn't survive. Or maybe they just kept things simple. Jewellery is rare, but there are a few finds. In Denisova Cave, archaeologists found a green stone bracelet and some animal tooth pendants. The bracelet is especially interesting. It's made from a soft green stone called chlorite, polished smooth with a drilled hole for a string. It's old, very old. Some scientists think it could be up to 40,000 years old, maybe even older. But here's the problem. Nobody knows for sure if Denisovans made it, or if it was left by another group. The dating is uncertain, and the layers in the cave are mixed up. It's a clue, but not a clear answer. What about art? So far, there's no confirmed Denisovan cave art. In places like France and Spain, Neanderthals and modern humans left handprints, animals and symbols on cave walls. But in Siberia and Asia, there's nothing that's definitely Denisovan. Maybe they didn't make art. Maybe they used materials that didn't last. Or maybe the caves they used just haven't been found yet. It's another mystery. Sometimes the most important evidence is what's missing. For Denisovans, that's almost everything. No campsites, no burial grounds, no clear sign of how they lived day to day. Scientists have tried looking in places where other ancient humans lived, valleys, riverbanks, mountain caves. But the Denisovan trail is faint. Maybe they moved often, never staying long enough to leave big trash piles. Maybe they preferred hidden places, far from where we've looked. Modern technology has helped a lot. With better DNA testing, scientists can now extract and study tiny fragments from ancient bones, even if they're just crumbs. This is how they were able to confirm the Jawbone from Tibet belonged to a Denisovan. The proteins in the enamel match the patterns found in the Denisova cave girl. This kind of work is slow and careful. One mistake can ruin a sample forever. Scientists have also tried to rebuild Denisovan faces using their DNA. By comparing Denisovan genes to modern people, they can guess certain features: broad jaws, wide faces, maybe a bit more robust than us. But it's all indirect. Until someone finds a complete skull, it's just a best guess. Now let's talk about population numbers. How many Denisovans were there? The DNA gives some hints. Genetic diversity, the number of differences in their DNA, suggest that Denisovan groups were small and scattered. Some lived far apart with long stretches of wilderness between them. This made it hard for groups to mix. It also meant that if a disaster hit one group, there wasn't much backup nearby. Over time, that can shrink numbers fast. The DNA from Denisova Cave and the Tibetan Jawbone show these groups were already quite different from each other. That means they'd been separated for a long time. Maybe they couldn't travel easily across the land. Maybe big rivers, mountains, or glaciers kept them apart. Or maybe they just like to stick to their own territories. There's another clever way scientists look for evidence: by studying the DNA of living people. By mapping out where Denisovan genes show up in modern populations, they can draw a rough map of where Denisovans once lived. The highest levels are in parts of Asia and the Pacific, but there are traces in other places too, like South Asia or even parts of East Asia. Every time a new population is tested, there's a chance of finding new Denisovan connections. One of the wildest discoveries came in 2018. In Denisova Cave, scientists found a single bone from a teenage girl. Tests showed her mother was a Neanderthal and her father was a Denisovan. She was a first-generation hybrid. This is the only direct proof we have of two different types of ancient humans having a child together. It means these groups met, talked, maybe even lived together for a while. The bone is tiny, but the implications are huge. Hybrid children like this weren't just rare accidents. The DNA in living people shows that mixing happened more than once. Different groups, different times, different places. The Denisovan story isn't about a single tribe. It's a web of connections, some close, some distant, all written into our bodies. But the search hasn't stopped. Every year, archaeologists open new caves, dig new sites, and test new samples. In 2019, a team in Laos found a piece of skull that looked ancient. It could be Denisovan, or maybe something else. In the Philippines, a group called Homo luzonensis was found. A tiny human with strange teeth. Maybe they met Denisovans, maybe they were related. The evidence is thin, but the possibilities are growing. There's a race against time too. Climate change, mining and tourism threaten many ancient caves. In some places the entrance has collapsed, or the site is underwater. Bones rot. DNA breaks down. Every year that passes, more evidence disappears forever. Scientists work fast, but nature is always faster. Why is the evidence so hard to find? Partly it's geography. Siberia is huge, cold and remote. Much of Asia is covered in thick forests, mountains or swamps. Caves are rare, and the ones that exist are hard to reach. In some places the soil is too acidic. Bones dissolve in just a few decades. Even when fossils are found, they're often mixed with the animal bones or broken into tiny bits. Another reason is luck some ancient humans buried. They're dead, leaving big skeletons in protected places. Others didn't. If Denisovans left their dead on the ground, scavengers and weather could destroy the bones fast. Or maybe they cremated their dead, leaving even fewer traces. Sometimes the problem is in the way we look. For years, scientists assumed all the ancient bones found in Asia belonged to either modern humans or Neanderthals. Some Denisovan bones may have been misidentified, sitting in museum drawers, labelled as something else. It takes careful testing to find the truth, and old bones are often too fragile for new tests. The search is also about technology. 20 years ago, DNA testing was slow, expensive, and needed a lot of material. Now scientists can work with a single cell, or even a smear of dirt. Every year the tests get better. One day soon, we might be able to scan entire museum collections in a few weeks, looking for hidden Denisovan clues. Another line of evidence comes from the genes themselves. When scientists looked at the Denisovan genome, they saw signs of ancient mixing, not just with modern humans and Neanderthals, but maybe with even older humans. Ghost lineages, they call them. These are groups we haven't found bones for yet, but we can see their DNA mixed in. It's proof that Denisovans weren't alone. The ancient world was crowded, and everyone was mixing, splitting and joining again. Some of the most convincing clues about Denisovans come from genetics, not fossils. For example, the gene that helps modern Tibetans live at high altitude, EPAS1, comes from Denisovans. It's not just a random bit of DNA, it's a working adaptation, still helping people survive today. You can see its effects in blood tests, in how people handle thin air, in their body's response to low oxygen. That's real, living evidence. Other Denisovan genes affect immune systems, helping people fight off local diseases. In some places these genes are common, in others they're rare. It shows that Denisovans didn't just vanish. They left behind tools for survival, a kind of biological toolkit passed down through generations. But here's where it gets tricky. Not everyone carries the same Denisovan genes. Some people have bits that help with altitude, others with immunity, others with brain function or metabolism. Scientists are still figuring out what all these genes do. Some are helpful, some might cause problems. It's a living experiment, playing out inside our cells. There's another mystery about Denisovan children. The few teeth we have are big, bigger than modern human or Neanderthal teeth. Some scientists think Denisovan kids grew fast, maybe reaching adulthood sooner. Or maybe their diet was so tough it made their jaws and teeth stronger. We don't know for sure. But it's a clue that their lives were different from ours. Then there's the question of migration. How did Denisovans get from Siberia to Southeast Asia and the Pacific? Did they walk or build boats? The land was different back then, with ice sheets and land bridges. It's possible they travelled along coastlines, following rivers, or even crossing open water. If they made boats, nothing survived. Wood and rope rot away, leaving no trace after so much time. Some scientists use computer models to track ancient climate and migration routes. These models show possible paths Denisovans could have taken, but they're just guesses built on limited data. Every new fossil, every new DNA sample can change the map in an instant. The hunt for Denisovans is a team effort. It takes archaeologists, geneticists, geologists, and even local people who know the land. Sometimes discoveries happen by accident. A farmer finds a strange bone. A monk keeps a jawbone as a relic. A caver stumbles across ancient teeth. Science is about careful planning, but luck plays a big part. People sometimes ask, will we ever find a Denisovan skeleton? Nobody knows. The odds aren't great, but the search goes on. Every year brings a new hope. Maybe the next cave will have what we're looking for. Maybe the next teast will reveal a hidden clue. But even without a skeleton, the evidence is adding up. The DNA, the jawbone, the hybrid child, the traces in cave dirt, the green stone bracelet, all these pieces point to a real, complex story. A group of humans who lived, loved, travelled, and changed the world in ways we're only starting to understand. It's easy to get frustrated with the gaps, but sometimes the search itself is the point. Every test, every dig, every late night in a cold cave is a way of honouring people who came before us. Denisovans are hard to see, but they're not forgotten. They're written into the land, the bones and the living bodies of people all over the world. And as long as the search continues, the story isn't finished. There's always another clue, another question, another layer of dirt to sift through. The Denisovan mystery is still wide open. The next answer could be waiting anywhere, on a mountain, in a jungle, or even in the DNA of someone alive right now. From the search itself, we learn something important. History isn't a straight line, it's a tangled web, full of false starts, dead ends, and sudden breakthroughs. Denisovans remind us that our story is bigger, older, and stranger than we ever imagined, and the hunt for their traces will go on as long as there are questions left to ask. Let's zoom out for a minute. Look at the big picture of human history, not just the Denisovans, but all the humans who ever lived. Most of us grew up with this simple idea. Humans started out as something like apes, then they changed, stood up, got smarter, and finally became us. It's a neat story, easy to follow, but it's not really true. The real story is messier, a lot messier. Imagine a river, not a straight river, but one that splits into many branches, then twists and turns, sometimes coming back together, sometimes breaking apart forever. That's how human evolution really worked. Different groups split off, went their own way, changed in their own style, and sometimes met up again. When they did, they didn't always fight. Sometimes they traded. Sometimes they learned from each other. Sometimes they had children together. This idea is called the braided stream, or braided story of human evolution. Instead of a straight line, it's a tangled braid. Strands split, cross, twist, and sometimes join back up. Denisovans are just one strand. Neanderthals are another. Modern humans, us, are a third. But there were more. Some we have names for, like Homo erectus. Some we only know from DNA, not bones. Scientists call them ghost populations. We know they were there because their genes show up inside us, mixed in with everything else. So let's break it down. For a long time, scientists didn't see the braid. They thought of evolution as a ladder, each rung a little bit closer to us. But in the last 20 years, DNA changed everything. Suddenly, the story wasn't about one species slowly turning into another. It was about many groups living at the same time, meeting, splitting, and sometimes sharing their lives. Here's what that looks like on the ground. Around 400,000 years ago, there were at least 3 main groups of humans walking the earth. Early Neanderthals in Europe and the Middle East, Denisovans in Asia, and the ancestors of modern humans in Africa. Each group was changing in its own way, shaped by where they lived, what they ate, and the challenges they faced. Neanderthals were stocky, built for cold weather. They hunted big animals, made sharp tools, left behind cave art and necklaces made from animal teeth. Denisovans, as we've seen, are harder to pin down. Their bones are rare, their tools are simple, but their genes spread far and wide. Modern humans started out in Africa, but over time they spread out too. Now here's where the braid gets interesting. As modern humans moved out of Africa, they didn't just sweep across empty land. They ran into other humans, real, living groups with their own languages, skills, and ways of life. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they learned, and sometimes they had children together. Those children carried genes from both sides. That's why the DNA of people today is such a mix. It wasn't just one big event, not a single night or a single generation. The mixing happened over and over, sometimes in the same place, sometimes in new places as groups moved around. Each time the braid got more tangled. Genes from Denisovans ended up in people living on islands, in mountains, in jungles. Neanderthal genes mixed in too. It's not one braid, but a whole bunch of strands, twisting and looping around each other. Think about this. Every person alive today is carrying around echoes of these meetings. The shape of your nose or jaw, the way your body handles cold or disease, some of that comes from these ancient mixings. Even the way your body uses oxygen at high altitudes or fights off certain viruses could be a gift from a group you never heard of. But the braid isn't just about DNA, it's about ideas too. When 2 groups met, they didn't just swap genes. Sometimes they shared tools or stories. Maybe one group showed another how to make a better spear, or how to find food in a tough season. Maybe they shared songs, beliefs, or even jokes. The evidence is thin, but it's hard to imagine humans meeting and not talking, learning, or trading. Sometimes the evidence is in the tools themselves. Archaeologists have found stone blades in some places that look like a mix between Neanderthal and modern human styles. In other places, bone needles appear out of nowhere. Did someone invent them alone, or did they learn from a neighbour? We may never know for sure. But the timing lines up. Tools change quickly after groups meet. It's like a spark. New ideas spread faster than genes. Let's talk about language for a second. We don't have any written records from Denisovans, Neanderthals, or early modern humans, but language is old, really old. Some scientists think it's at least 50,000 years old, maybe much older. Language is one of the best tools for sharing ideas. Imagine 2 groups meeting by a river. They don't speak the same tongue, but maybe they pick up a few words. Maybe they use signs or gestures. Over time, languages blend just like genes. Words can travel a long way, even if the people who spoke them are gone. Religion and beliefs might have braided too. When groups met, they probably shared stories about where they came from, why the world is the way it is, what happens after death. We'll never know the details. But humans have always looked for meaning. Maybe a sacred mountain or a lucky charm started with one group and spread to others. Sometimes you can see hints of this in the symbols people carved or painted. Now let's think about what happens when strands break. Sometimes a group faded away. Maybe they moved or maybe they died out. But their genes, and maybe their ideas, lived on in the people they met. The group itself is gone, but its strand is still in the braid. Denisovans are a perfect example. Their bones are almost gone, but their genes are everywhere. This braided story changes how we see ourselves. It's not about being pure or separate. It's about mixing, adapting, and learning from others. It's about survival, but also about creativity. If you had a time machine and went back to the Ice Age, you wouldn't see one kind of human. You'd see many. Some would look familiar. Some would look different. But all of them would be part of the same big experiment, trying to survive, trying to thrive, passing on what worked. Sometimes the braid gets tighter. This happens when groups shrink or move closer together, sharing more. Genes and ideas. Other times the braid becomes loose. Groups move apart, develop their own ways, maybe never meet again. Climate, geography, and plain old luck all play a role. A river floods, an ice sheet grows, a new tool is invented. Each event shifts the braid. Here's where DNA is so powerful. It's not just about ancestors you can name. It's about all the unknown people, the ghosts whose bones we'll never find, but who left a mark inside us. In some cases, we only know they existed because there's a chunk of DNA in modern people that doesn't match Neanderthals, Denisovans, or modern humans. It had to come from someone else, another strand in the braid. There's a theory that in some places humans met and mixed with local groups, picking up useful genes. In other places there was no mixing, or maybe the groups never met at all. Some islands or valleys might have been home to humans who never saw another group for thousands of years. Their strand in the braid ended there. Or maybe it looped around and popped up somewhere else far away. It's not just about ancient humans either. The braid goes on today. Every family, every marriage between people from different backgrounds adds new twists. But in the past, the stakes were higher. If your group lived in a harsh place, picking up the right gene from a neighbour could mean the difference between life and death. That's why some Denisovan genes, like the ones for high-altitude living, are so common in Tibet but almost nowhere else. Let's imagine a scene. Two groups meet at a river crossing. One is local, the other is new to the area. The newcomers are struggling with the cold, the food, the strange sicknesses. The locals have genes and tricks that help them survive. Maybe they don't even know why they're different. Maybe it's just the way our people are. But when the two groups mix, the children get the best of both worlds. They're stronger, healthier, able to handle the local dangers. That's the braid in action. Survival through sharing. Sometimes the braid holds secrets we haven't even guessed. For a long time, nobody thought ancient humans could travel by boat. But people reached Australia at least 50,000 years ago. That means somebody, maybe carrying Denisovan genes, crossed open water. Did they build rafts? Did they follow the coast? Did they get lost and stumble onto new land? We don't know. But once again, it's a sign that humans have always been curious, always willing to take risks. The braid is also about false starts. There are groups we only know from a single tooth or bone. Some species, like Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Indonesia, seem to pop up out of nowhere and then vanish. Maybe they're another strand in the story, or maybe they were a dead end. We don't know if they mixed with Denisovans, or with us. The evidence is slim, but their story is still woven into the big picture. Let's talk about why the braid matters now. In some ways, it just makes things more complicated. There's no clean answer to questions like, where do I come from? Or, what makes me human? But there's something comforting in the messiness. It means nobody is pure anything. Everyone is a mix, a living record of ancient journeys, meetings, and surprises. It also means that every time we find a new bone, a new DNA pattern, or a new tool, the story can change. What we think we know today might be out of date tomorrow. That's why scientists keep digging, keep testing, keep arguing about what it all means. The braid is still being woven, even now. Sometimes people want the story to be simple, a straight line from apes to us. But the Braid tells a richer, more honest story. One where difference isn't a weakness, but a strength. Where survival depends on being open to new people, new ideas, new ways of living. Now, here's another angle. The Braid isn't just about the past, it's about the future too. The genes that helped someone survive in the mountains 100,000 years ago are still helping people today. The same goes for immune genes, or maybe even genes that shape how we think or feel. We're not just carrying history, we're carrying solutions built and tested by people who came before us. This is why I love making these. The past is never really gone. It's alive, humming in the background, touching everything we do, every choice, every ability, every quirk. There's a story behind it, even if we'll never know the details. Let's be honest, there are limits. DNA can't tell us what someone believed, what made them laugh, or who they loved. It can't show us their music or the stories they whispered around the fire. But it can show us how connected we all are, how every person is made up of thousands of stories braided together in one living body. In the end, the Denisovan mystery is just one part of the bigger braid. Their bones are rare, their faces are a guess, but their genes are real. Their strand in the braid didn't end when the last Denisovan disappeared. It kept going inside us, mixed, blended, changed, but still there. Maybe that's the lesson. Our story isn't about walls, it's about bridges. Every time people met and shared, the braid got stronger. Every difference was a chance to learn, to adapt, to survive. We're not the end of the braid, we're just the latest twist. So next time you hear someone talk about pure anything, remember the braid. Remember the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, the ghosts living on in our DNA. History isn't a straight line. It's a living web full of surprises, and you are part of it, every single day. From the bigger picture, we start to see just how wide and deep our shared story really goes. And there's always more to discover, more questions to ask, as we move from the ancient braid to the next chapter in our human journey. So, after all of this, bones, DNA, lost stories, and that wild tangled braid, where does the Denisovan mystery leave us? It's easy to get caught up in the details. Teeth and jawbones, genes for altitude, ghost populations, and questions scientists still can't answer. But step back for a second. Set all the charts and facts aside. What does this story actually mean for you and for everyone alive today? First, it means we're all part of something much bigger than we ever imagined. Most of us grew up thinking of ourselves as one thing, one family, one country, maybe one group. But the truth is, your story goes back way further, deeper, wider. It doesn't stop at your grandparents, or even your first ancestors who farmed or built cities. It stretches back to a time when the world was full of different humans, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and secrets. There's something almost magical about that. Picture it. A map with no borders, just lines that twist and cross, then fade away, then come back somewhere new. Every person is a mix of old journeys and meetings. Even if you never leave your hometown, your blood remembers mountains, forests, islands, and caves. It remembers both the victories and the dead ends. Some of those memories are so deep you'll never know their names, but they're still there, working behind the scenes. Now, let's talk about what this means for how we see us and them. In the old story, it was easy to draw lines. Modern humans here, Neanderthals there, Denisovans over there. But the real story is messier and way more interesting. There was never a wall between groups, only rivers to cross, forests to wander, and sometimes just a few miles of open land. If you could meet your distant ancestors, you'd see faces both strange and familiar. Maybe you'd see eyes like yours, or a smile you recognize. Maybe you'd see someone who looks nothing like you at all. But that's the point. We come from difference. We come from mixing. That's not just genetics. It's a lesson about people too. Every time two groups met, something new could happen. They might share a tool, a trick, a song, or a way to survive. Sometimes it was a disaster. Other times it was a breakthrough. But each meeting changed the story. Every bridge built made the braid stronger. Think about how this plays out even now. People move, fall in love, start families. New traditions are born. New ways of thinking appear. Even today, every child born is a new twist in the braid. Our differences aren't a problem to solve. They're the whole reason we're still here. If humans had stayed in one place, never meeting anyone new, we wouldn't have made it this far. Survival means change. It means learning from others, even if they seem totally foreign at first. The Denisovan mystery shows us something else too. Even when a group disappears, they're not really gone. Their genes and maybe even their ideas keep moving forward. You can lose every artifact, every story, every name, and still a piece survives. Sometimes what's left is hidden. Sometimes it's right there in your cells, helping you breathe at the roof of the world or fight off a fever. Sometimes you'll never notice it at all. This is true for other things too. Memories, habits, superstitions, and stories can all survive in quiet ways. Maybe you cook something the way your great-great-grandparents did, never knowing where the recipe started. Maybe you use a word or gesture that's older than your language. Pieces of the past slip through, even when nobody is watching. But let's not pretend we have all the answers. The Denisovan mystery is still wide open. Every time scientists dig up a new bone or test another sample, the story can flip upside down. Maybe tomorrow someone will find a Denisovan village buried under the ice, full of tools and carvings we never dreamed of. Maybe we'll never find more than a handful of bones. That's part of the adventure. The past is always changing shape, just like the braid. If you feel a little lost in all these twists and turns, that's normal. The truth is, nobody knows the full story. Even the experts are guessing half the time. But that's okay. The mystery is the point. It's what keeps us looking, asking, wondering. Now let's turn all this ancient DNA into something personal. What you carry isn't just genes for surviving in the cold or fighting off sickness. Maybe you also have a bit of their stubbornness, their curiosity, their ability to adapt when things got tough. You're proof that mixing works, that learning from others, even total strangers, can save your life. The story of the Denisovans is about more than just old bones or weird genes. It's about what happens when you open a door instead of building a wall. When you make room for something new, even if it's strange or scary. Sometimes that's the difference between fading away and moving forward. There's one last thing to think about. The Denisovans are a reminder that history is full of people who almost vanished without a trace. People who didn't leave behind cities or huge monuments, just a few bones, a handful of genes, and questions for the future. But their story still matters. It's still being written every day by people who don't even know they're carrying it. So when you feel small or lost, remember this. You're not just one person standing alone. You're the result of 1,000 chances, 1,000,000 meetings, 1,000,000,000 choices made by people you'll never know. You're the latest chapter in a story that's still being told. And if you ever wonder if anything you do will last, think about that finger bone in the cave. It sat in darkness for tens of thousands of years. Nobody knew it was there, but it changed everything. Sometimes the smallest thing can echo the longest. That's the real power of the Denisovan mystery. It's not just about the past. It's about possibility. About what happens when you leave space for surprises. When you accept that you'll never have all the answers, but you keep looking anyway. In the end, we're all walking braids, living maps of journeys, risks and meetings, all tangled together. The Denisovans are still with us, not in their own form, but in the way we breathe, move, and think, in the way we belong to more than one story, more than one place. So the next time you glance in the mirror, see more than your own face. See the shadow of a mountain, the glint of a cave, the memory of a people who almost slipped away. See the braid, still twisting, still growing, still full of mysteries waiting to be found. We're all part of the story, and it's not over yet. Good night.